I want to introduce our incoming president. I told Marcia I didn't want to do this. I want to continue to be president, but I'm going to ask her one more time. Can I stay? Dr. Eleanor Counselman served on the faculty at Harvard Medical School for the past 25 years, has a private practice in Belmont, Massachusetts. She's had many roles within this organization, serving as editor of the group Circle, co-chair of the Institute Committee. She's served on the editorial board of our journal, the International Journal of Group Psychotherapy, and has also served as president of one of our strong affiliates, the Northeastern Society for Group Psychotherapy. She has presented both nationally and internationally and has authored numerous papers and book chapters. She has received the Alonso Award for Excellence in Psychodynamic Group Theory and also the Affiliate Society Assembly Award. So this marks the formal transition of presidency. I want to give a warm welcome and personal wishes to Eleanor. This has been a tremendous 2 years for me. I wish you rich and rewarding and productive 2 years, Eleanor.
Thank you.
Eleanor Counselman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I haven't even said anything yet. It's very encouraging to me that Les is so reluctant to give up this role. It makes me think there must be something really fun about it. So thank you very much for that nice introduction, Les, and congratulations, Jeff, once again, on your well-deserved honor. And I loved your talk. It really was wonderful. It's really such an honor also to be giving the Anne and Ramon Alonso Plenary. Anne was such an important teacher for me, and Ramon continues to be a good friend. It is going to take some getting used to this new title of president, though, and it reminds me of another time in my life when my identity hadn't quite caught up with the reality. My husband, Chuck, who I'll introduce in a moment, and I were married when we were both in graduate school, but he was a couple of years ahead of me. So he finished his PhD first, and I got used to Dr. Counselman, meaning him. Eventually, I got my degree, and I also became Dr. Counselman. Soon after that, a potential therapy client called for an appointment and asked to speak to Dr. Counselman. Without thinking, I said, "I'm sorry, he's not here right now. May I take a message?" There was a pause, and the person said, somewhat puzzled, "Oh, I thought Dr. Counselman was a woman." Well, I'm proud to say I replied, "Oh, that Dr. Counselman. Just a moment, I'll go get her." Hello? So that brings me to my husband, Chuck, my life partner, my main support. Stand up, he's here. Stand up and just say hello. Chuck has walked with me every step of this journey, and I am so grateful. He's one of the early contributors to the GPS technology, and he has been my GPS in life for sure. So I look out at all of you, and I feel so grateful for so many friends, old and new. And I feel grateful for the many new young faces here. You are our future, and I welcome you to AGPA. This is such a special organization, and I hope you come to treasure it as much as I do. I attended my first AGPA meeting when I was a brand new professional. And yes, Marcia Block was up on the podium even then. At the time, I thought she was about my mother's age. She's actually younger than I am. How's that for transference? So I have thought back to those early meetings and my journey from then to now, when I can say with conviction, I am a group therapist. I realized that at some point I began to think about myself as a group therapist, not a therapist who runs a couple of groups along with everything else in a clinical practice, but a group therapist. Being a group therapist is central to my identity, and even though I spend less time each week running groups than in other clinical activities. And I firmly believe that my group therapy training has been the single most important influence on my clinical career. I hope as you listen to this talk, you'll see why. I also believe that the value of group therapy training cannot be overestimated, even though it is sadly undervalued in many current graduate programs. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, what being a group therapist means to me, and especially for the newer clinicians here today, what I hope it will come to mean to you. The dynamic and systemic knowledge that I've learned by studying group process has benefited my entire clinical practice. Because after all, at its core, psychotherapy is about interpersonal connection. And what better place to learn about that than in a group? And yet, as many of you already know, leading groups is not for the faint of heart. It requires relating to multiple clients simultaneously and containing the whirlwind of affect only groups can generate, while at the same time maintaining a broader, more systemic focus than individual work. I think of it as cooking on an 8-burner stove. So I've been thinking some about what makes group therapy so compelling and what goes into an identity as a group therapist. Most of us don't set out to become group therapists. Typically, we discover group therapy as part of our training, either in graduate school or clinical placement. I bet most of us don't set out thinking we will even like group therapy. This is as true of therapists as it is of our members. The thought of leading a group can be scary, with a lot of potential for feeling like you don't know what you're doing and feeling shame. It can feel like a lot of people are depending on you to know what to say and do. And this vulnerability is especially heightened if you're learning group therapy early in your career and not confident in general. Of course, we all make mistakes. However, it's one thing to make a mistake with an individual client in the safety of the consulting room. You can always forget to tell your supervisor. Group, on the other hand, carries the threat of considerable exposure. And it's not just making a mistake in front of your group members. Many of them have come to you referred by colleagues, and it's easy to imagine stories of your incompetence getting back to your referral sources. I, for one, this may surprise you, put off leading a group as long as I could. At my training site, I first observed a weekly therapy group for a whole year, wondering, how does that leader know what to say and when to say it? Then I co-led several groups before I finally got up my courage to lead my own group. And once I had my own group, I remember worrying constantly about whether anyone would show up. Or if they did, what would I say? I'm guessing many of you know this anxiety pretty well. In the psychiatry resident training groups that I've led for many years at Massachusetts General Hospital, I've heard this anxiety expressed over and over as the residents approach the dreaded PGY 3-year with its required therapy group co-leader experience. However, after a period of adjustment, many discover, often to their surprise, that they actually like the experience and they see how much the patients in the group benefit. I'll always remember the late Ann Alonso talking about her first experience leading a therapy group. She was an intern at the old Boston State Hospital, and was assigned to lead a therapy group on a locked inpatient unit. She described her terror as the door closed behind her and she entered the room where the group was to be held. Frozen, she stood there. Then an old woman, obviously a longtime patient, said, "Honey, first you put the chairs in a circle." So what goes into being a group therapist? When I thought about this question, the following came to my mind: courage, discipline, a certain kind of loneliness, transparency about mistakes, excitement for working in the here and now, and perhaps most importantly, a strong belief in the healing power of connection. I'm going to start with courage. It takes courage to be a group therapist. Shapiro and Gans have written about the courage of the group therapist. They note, "Our patients buffet us about with the difficult emotions it is their prerogative to express. They cite the multiple transferences to understand, multiple countertransference impulses to manage, and unarguably primitive fears of mob attack or mass exodus, of engulfment or abandonment. And in all this, the group leader is observed constantly by some 6 or 8 people. Fear of exposure can be powerful. It takes courage to start and maintain a group. Group therapists must be risk takers in this respect. When our colleagues don't refer to us, when our individual clients don't accept our suggestion that group would be a useful next step, and when we worry about keeping our groups alive, our belief in group therapy sustains us. Not only do we know the progress that our group members make, but we're supported by the considerable research showing group as an effective treatment for many disorders. I invite all of you to check out the Practice Resources section of the AGPA website, the considerable work done by our Science to Services Task Force, and of course our journal. One reason I believe many therapists won't lead a group is their fear of experiencing shame. It's true that it feels bad to make a mistake in front of some 6 or 8 group members, and it can take courage to process it with the group. You have nowhere to hide. But having made my share of blunders over the years, I've become more accepting of my imperfect therapist self, and I think this is beneficial to group members. Admitting and processing a mistake is truly being the good enough mother. And we know that research indicates that even the best mothers are correctly attuned to their children only about 1/3 of the time. This is my favorite statistic of all time. I've had more than one group member say that the most important moments in group have been when I've owned a mistake and allowed the group to talk about it. For group members who have grown up with rigid, harsh, always right parents, or in families where processing of negative feelings was not possible, it's an amazing and healing experience to be allowed to challenge or correct the leader without retaliation, or for the leader to simply say, "I made a mistake there." And since we group therapists are members of the human race, we do make mistakes. We make mistakes on bills. We can misjudge a potential group member's fit for a particular group, leading to an early dropout. And we are certainly not perfectly attuned to what is going on in the group and in each member. In addition, although our egos are usually in charge, I suspect it's a rare group leader who's not been flooded with affect and reacted prematurely. I remember such an experience oh so well from when I was a relatively new institute leader here at the annual meeting. I attended the faculty meeting at lunch, which ran late. When I got to the elevators, they were packed with a crowd waiting. I realized I would be late to my own group, thus breaking the group agreement that I had so carefully gone over that morning. By the time I got into the elevator and to the floor, I was a mess. I was all limbic system. There was not a neuron functioning in my prefrontal cortex. I hurried down the hall, and I saw my group members waiting in the hall outside the locked institute room, many with their arms folded. I began apologizing before I even unlocked the door. They assured me, no problem, we understand about elevators. We came in and sat down, and a deadened silence ensued. Nobody seemed to have anything to say. As my pulse rate returned to normal, it occurred to me that maybe I had been too quick to apologize. Maybe there were some feelings about my lateness, not just no problem. I wondered all this aloud to the group, and sure enough, some angry feelings came out. After all, they had managed to get back on time despite the elevators, and the group proceeded with its previous vigor. Along with courage, there's a particular kind of discipline required of group leaders. Group leaders must be both part of and not part of their groups. We have a unique perch on the edge of the group. At times, we must resist emotional contagion. Think about humor. Groups often laugh together, and laughter for sure is contagious. Laughter can be very healing. It's tempting to join in automatically. But what if the laughter is actually a group member's tried and true way of covering emotional pain? How are you helping if you join with the defense? We have to be thoughtful about when we join and when we stay separate and encourage exploration. In the military, there's a term, walking the wire. It refers to one member of a platoon patrolling the perimeter of an encampment, keeping it safe for those inside. When I first heard that term, I thought, that is what we do as group leaders. We patrol the group boundary to keep it safe. We serve as gatekeepers, screening and hopefully admitting only new members who seem suitable for the group. We establish a group agreement, which is a form of boundary, and encourage notice and curiosity when it is violated. We protect the privacy of group members. We provide the container for the group, managing highly charged affect, keeping the group safe, and providing opportunities for connection, a sense of universality, and cohesion. Group therapists bear a unique kind of loneliness. As a group leader, you can feel surprisingly left out. You're with the group, but you're not a member. And this can be a lonely experience in a way not found in individual treatment. We long for intimacy, and groups provide the promise of that. It can be difficult to hold the boundary at times. B. Liebenberg spoke so eloquently about this in her Institute address some years ago, when she talked about how she felt when her group members went out together after a session, laughing and talking together, and she was left alone in the group room, putting the chairs back and emptying the wastebasket. I have felt the same left-out loneliness at times, especially if it's a group of high-functioning people who might otherwise have become friends of mine. Fortunately, this inevitable loneliness has an antidote. The antidote is to be part of your own groups. Peer groups, ongoing supervision, and of course coming to AGPA help protect us from loneliness and inoculate us against inappropriate boundary crossings with our group members. In his book, Persuasion and Healing, Jerome Frank talked about this part of the group and not part of the group position of the leader from another angle. He believed that all therapeutic success is dependent on the patient's sense of alliance with the healer. And he felt that group therapy amplifies the help that group treatment, that individual treatment offers. In the case of group, not only is the therapist the healer, but the group is itself. There is not only the non-judgmental acceptance by the therapist, but there is acceptance by one's peers, which ultimately may be more important. Members often perceive the therapist as having no choice because the therapist role demands acceptance, while fellow group members do have a choice. Fellow group members may experience similar problems and share their solutions and coping strategies in ways that the therapist cannot. I remember one group member who, on his final night in group, after years of hard and productive work, was asked what he thought he would miss about group. Without hesitation, he said, "I will miss the sense of belonging." In this respect, a group therapist understands the limitations of his or her usefulness to group and has the capacity, the discipline really, to step back and let the group members do the work. It's like the good parent who can allow a child to struggle with the task rather than stepping in to do it for them, knowing the value of mastery. Group therapists understand that if we do all the work, then we're depriving our members of the sense of competence and self-esteem that comes from helping each other. So what exactly is so compelling about being a group therapist? It may be implicit in what I've said so far, but I'll make it explicit. Group therapists feel tremendous excitement for working in the here and now. While clients talk in individual therapy about their relationship problems, in group they have them. That is the value of the here and now work in group. Not only do people bring and demonstrate their relational styles in group, but they are affected and often triggered by each other's relational styles. These horizontal transferences provide opportunities that simply don't occur in one-on-one therapy. Of course, it's not entirely fair to talk about people having their relational problems in group, because what we are really seeing, of course, are the adaptations that they developed long ago to early emotional challenges. Attachment theory teaches us that relational messages are received and encoded well before the verbal part of the brain comes online. Children begin to develop models of self and other long before words come, and thus these relational models are often out of conscious awareness. They are much better seen by observation than by report. The child who struggles in a difficult or dangerous family environment where emotional supplies are limited, given conditionally or unpredictably, comes up with strategies to survive. And these strategies are usually organized around protecting the parent because the child is still so dependent. Thus, the child who grows up with a depressed, unavailable mother who can't give the child what he or she needs may resolve, well, I don't need all that much anyway. This person may wonder in individual therapy why he or she is unable to make satisfying mutual relationships. But when you put that person in group, you can see the emotionally avoidant behavior. Or that same child might conclude, I never know whether my mother is really available to me, so I need to stay close, keep checking, and not go out there in the world and be independent. Or the person who grew up in a home where alcoholic rages or the effects of mental illness threaten to erupt at any time learns early that strong feelings are dangerous and that the goal of any relational interaction should be to keep things pleasant and safely distant. One client referred to it as putting hearts and flowers around everything. These folks may wonder in individual therapy why they're unable to make close, intimate relationships. But when you put them in a group, you can see in front of you the interpersonal behavior that limits intimacy. And over time, they can see it themselves. These people may all come to individual therapy with a sense of the problems they're currently having, but they lack awareness of how their current interpersonal style reflects an early adaptation that was necessary to survive and avoid unbearable pain. The here and now work of group is the most effective way of reaching that long-buried pain and fear and beginning to experiment with new solutions. Here and now work is exciting and effective, but it is challenging for the group leader. Even if you do right here, right now work in individual therapy, the challenges in group are multiplied compared to individual work. You're working with many clients at the same time, all with their own histories, current difficulties, and relationships with you and with each other. The leader must maintain a broader, more systemic approach than an individual therapist. In terms of intervention, in any given interaction, you have the choice of inviting a member to go deeper into intrapsychic work or to explore more of the interpersonal dynamics. Do you work with the individual, with a dyad, or the whole group? As Elliot Zeisel said in his Ormont lecture a few years ago, if dreams are a personal expression of our individuality, the same may be said of group leadership. Faced with the same clinical material, no two group leaders will respond and lead in precisely the same way. Leadership is a highly individual process. At the same time, there's nothing like a group experience for demonstrating the equally powerful resistance to the here and now. Group therapists are aware that this tension exists inside us as well as inside our groups. In every group session, we face the challenge of remaining aware of and open to our inner experience in the face of often strong affect. This requires ongoing internal processing of both intrapsychic and interpersonal pressures while remaining emotionally accessible to the group. And we surely do get hooked by our difficult members. As my husband likes to say, if they weren't difficult, they wouldn't be seeing you. Mullen Lesh has written that it is this hooking and unhooking process that is the most powerful aspect of group therapy, because that is where you truly engage with your group members. It's through this hooking and unhooking that we help our group members to develop secure connections and the capacity for true intimacy. And as group therapists, we know the power of connection with others. Recent advances in attachment theory have confirmed we never outgrow our need for connection, for a source of comfort in fear and adversity. The attachment theorists call this our safe haven. We see this in children who are able to separate and function independently best when they know a secure attachment figure is available if needed. Our groups serve this function for the members. Members who come to feel securely attached to their group talk about taking the group with me in my head when they're away from the group. Just as a small child who is securely attached learns to carry the image of his primary caregiver. Group therapists understand the importance of personal narratives. For me, one of the biggest satisfactions in group work is seeing how group members rework their personal stories. Thomas Wolfe wrote in his introduction to Look Homeward, Angel, "We are the sum of all the moments of our life." But these moments can add up differently depending on your point of view at the time. We construct and reconstruct our personal narratives through relationships, and there is an instinctive longing to bear witness to significant events. I'll always remember being on a train that went through New York City 2 days after 9/11. As we approached, the plume of smoke rising from the devastation was starkly visible. The experience was profound, and I noticed that every single person in that train car either turned to their seatmate or got on a cell phone. You could not go through that experience alone. As group leaders, we know this and create a safe space for members to bear witness to each other's lives and to share, examine, and rework their narratives. In my groups, whenever a new person joins, the group members all share their personal stories with the new members. This is not something I've told them to do, it's just a tradition that has arisen. And I love hearing how these personal narratives change and improve over time. How many of you have heard of the Roman god Janus? He's that fellow with the two faces. Well, recently, I've thought that Janice should be considered the god of group therapy. Why? Well, Janice gets a bad rap for being two-faced, but he's actually about much, much more. Janice is the god of gates and doorways. He's the god of transitions and journeys. He both looks to the past and he looks to the future. I think he captures the multiple perspectives that group leaders maintain. As group leaders, we are gatekeepers for the group, and we position ourselves at the doorway of the group, protecting the boundaries. And even as we work in the present, we keep an eye on our group members' pasts, and we help them face their futures. I also think that as group therapists, we need to keep a Janice-like position with respect to the larger healthcare system. Absolutely, we must keep looking inward, improving our skills, replenishing ourselves at group therapy meetings like AGPA. But we must also look outward and speak about group therapy to the wider world. There is a huge need for mental health services, and that will only grow. We know that group therapy works, but we can't just say that to each other. Each of you can be an advocate for group therapy. You can suggest group to a client. You can describe the benefits of group therapy to another therapist who doesn't know much about groups. You can present about group at other professional meetings, write about group therapy for other publications, and provide training in group at clinics and counseling centers. We must encourage graduate programs to offer more group training. Let's share a dream to put group therapy at the forefront in treatment of mental illness and interpersonal difficulties. So why do we do and love this demanding work of leading groups? Whether due to nature or nurture, or most likely both, group therapists are group people. And if you look at Yalom's classic list of the therapeutic factors in group therapy, you'll see that leaders benefit from many of them as well. Think about it. Certainly universality. How often have you felt a bond with a group member around a problem or issue? Altruism feels great to help another person. Vicarious learning? Sure. Self-understanding? We're always working on that. Motherwell and Shea said it well. Why then do we become and remain group therapists? For us, working with people who begin as strangers and who become intimate partners in learning about themselves and others is compelling, challenging, and often extremely moving. As leaders, we feel effectively engaged and intellectually and emotionally stirred by our patients' courage, perseverance, and willingness to risk. This encourages us to risk the possibility of exposure and the possibility of self-knowledge and growth. So let's go back to what that hospitalized woman said to Ann Alonso about putting the chairs in a circle. We probably all do that without thinking much about it. But a circle is fundamental to group therapy and sets the stage for connection. It's the heart of the matter. Within the circle, everyone can see everyone else. Everyone has an equal place. There are no front row seats, no hiding in the back row. A circle has no end row seats, so there's always someone by your side. A circle is an enclosed space and therefore containing. As group leaders, we create and maintain that circle, and within that space, we take pride in seeing our members learn, grow, and live the best lives they possibly can. That's why we love this work. So thank you, and remember, first you put your chairs in a circle.